Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Parapsychology Foundation's Lyceum, course number 202, Beyond the Body, Out-of-Body Experiences and Near-Death Experiences. My name is Lizette Coley, and I'm the Executive Director of Parapsychology Foundation. On behalf of our Board of Trustees and our President, Mrs. Eileen Coley, I welcome you all here this morning. Parapsychology Foundation has been in existence for over 50 years, acting as a clearinghouse for information and serving our two constituencies, academia and the public at large. During our recently celebrated anniversary of the Foundation, the Lyceum was formulated seeking to advance education in parapsychology, a field where there's great interest but also many misconceptions as to how and what we do in fact study. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to your two instructors today. You're lucky to have them, as in today's world, lots of people around the world call themselves parapsychologists, and yet few have dedicated themselves to the actual study and research involved. Dr. Carlos Alvarado obtained his doctoral degree in psychology from the University of Edinburgh in 1997 and was a research assistant to Dr. Ian Stevenson, who is the leading academician in the study of reincarnation at the Division of Parapsychology at the University of Virginia. He was a visiting scholar at the Institute for Parapsychology, now known as the Rhine Research Center in Durham, North Carolina. He is the president-elect of the Parapsychological Association, having served in that capacity once before, and also serves as the president of the Asociación Iberoamericana de Parapsicología. Carlos is Parapsychology Foundation's chairman of domestic and international programs, along with the series editor of Parapsychology Foundation's scholarly monograph series, and the associate editor of our Parapsychology Foundation International Journal of Parapsychology, which you may see here. He has conducted research in Puerto Rico, Scotland, and the United States on the out-of-body experience as well as on other psychic phenomena. He's also known for his work as a historian of the field. Now, Nancy Zingrone was a research fellow and also a visiting scholar at the Institute for Parapsychology in Durham. While there, she conducted ESP experimental research and was an organizer and faculty member of the Rhine Center's summer study program. She is a past president also of the Parapsychological Association and is on the board of director of both the Parapsychological Association and the Asociación Iberoamericana de Parapsicología. In addition to serving as PF's Director of Publications and as the executive editor of, again, PF's International Journal of Parapsychology, she is the associate editor of the series Advances in Parapsychological Research. She is presently finishing up her doctoral thesis in psychology and parapsychology to be submitted at the University of Edinburgh in mid-2002. So it gives me great pleasure to turn the proceedings over to Nancy and Carlos, please.
Good morning. Welcome to our course on out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. This course is part of the efforts that the Foundation is doing to provide information to the public on different aspects of parapsychology. We first started our series with a general introduction to parapsychology that was followed by a course on hauntings and apparitions and ghosts. And now we have the third course, which is out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences. What we're trying to do is cover the whole area of parapsychology, but there are so many topics, so many areas, that it's just impossible to do it just in one or two courses. So hopefully we'll be developing in the future many more of these activities to keep discussing the different areas of the field. Today we're focusing on out-of-body and near-death experiences, which are some of the most fascinating phenomena that human experience can offer. They are phenomena that can change the outlook of an individual in many ways, as we will see when we get into details. But let me just start with giving you a very general definition of what do we mean by an out-of-body experience or by a near-death experience. And then we'll move on into actual case reports that will help, flesh out the definition. When we say an out-of-body experience, we are referring to a sensation or an experience that someone has that they can perceive their surroundings from a point of view different from that of the physical body. That may not say much, but imagine that right now, as you are looking at me, you're looking at me from the position of being seated down there, standing up here. Imagine that all of a sudden, your visual perception of me, of the whole background, changes, and you find yourself, the part of you that feels, that thinks, that perceives, that analyzes what's happening. Instead of being sitting there, you find yourself floating close to the ceiling. And then you recognize that you are up there because you are looking from that viewpoint, you're looking down at me. You look down and you see your physical body sitting on the chair. That's essentially what an out-of-body experience is. Feeling that you are outside of your physical body and still you feel that you are functioning mentally just as you function when you are in your physical body. Or sometimes even better. Some people say that their thinking becomes more clear. But the basic criteria is that separation from your physical body. When that experience occurs in conditions that are close to death, we tend to talk more about a near-death experience. However, a near-death experience is not necessarily the same as an out-of-body experience. You can have a near-death experience without necessarily feeling that you are going outside of your body. Many of the recent studies have found that people are in what they call the near-death state when they don't report an out-of-body experience, but they report other aspects of the experience, such as finding themselves in a different place, in visions of people that have died, and similar phenomena. We're going to get into the details of what are the experiences that people have within the near-death and the out-of-body experience. These are experiences that, in general, they have one label of this is an OBE or out-of-body experience, this is an NDE or near-death experience. But inside each of these experiences, there are many other things that happen to people. There are so many sub or secondary experiences inside each of these experiences that it makes the whole thing really fascinating. So it's just more than just floating out and seeing your body. There are many other things that people feel who are there in this state. But in a general way, that's just a very simple definition. We're going to get into cases and you'll see what I mean. But let me show you, to give you an idea of this concept, the first transparency, that in a way chronicles how old the idea that something may leave our body and function independently. This is a very old Chinese drawing of a monk meditating that shows the idea that his spirit, his soul, in whatever way you want to conceptualize, is able to leave the body. When you see up there, it may not be very clear. This was downloaded from the web. It's kind of the shape of a small man coming out from the head of this person that is there meditating. This shows, this idea is really old, and it has been chronicled in the writings of ancient Chinese religion. The next one also shows the same idea, but this is more recent. This is in a book called The Projection of the Astral Body that was published in 1929. And it's an artistic conception of leaving your body. The first one, it has a man lying on a bed and slowly getting out of the body. The one on the bottom shows separation, almost a complete separation. The top one, the separation is still incomplete. But the whole concept is that you feel that you leave the body. And people feel it in that way, that they are still with full sensation of the whole physical body, but they're just moving out of it. It's very difficult, to picture this because, as you know, this is a phenomenon that is very subjective. It's very hard to have any objective recording. We don't have any pictures of people actually leaving their bodies. Also, there are some pictures that suggest that phenomena on occasion may affect a photographic plate. But in general, the only thing that we have are drawings like this that provide us just a very general description of the sensation that people feel. So let me give you some cases to get into the actual sensations. I'm going to start with an out-of-body case and then move to a near-death experience, and then I'll try to introduce you to what have we learned about research with this interesting phenomena. The first one is a very interesting case, very short and kind of light, kind of humorous. It happened to a Scottish man that was basically saying goodbye to his girlfriend, and he said he was taking her back home, and he said, leaning against a garden gate, kissing goodnight to girlfriend, aware that I'm leaning on the doorbell and that someone is coming to the door in response to the bell. And then he says, I was looking down on myself, watching all that was going. So what we have here is the man is taking his girlfriend back to the house. He's leaning, kissing her, at the same time presses the bell, and on the time that he hears the bell, he knows someone is coming, but the next thing he knows, he's floating up here, looking at himself, kissing the girlfriend, and being nervous that they're going to get caught kissing. And that's just a very simple, very short experience, but shows how many different contexts this experience can happen. Not all these experiences happen where you are close to death or in deep trances or in very serious conditions. Some of them happen in situations like this, daily life behaviors. They are less frequent, but they happen.
What year was that? Do you have anything about the year?
I don't have anything about the year.
Who would be anxious about kissing a girlfriend, right?
I collected this like 5 years ago, and many of the experiences range from 20 years old to 5 years or a few months old, or they had a different range. I don't have the information here.
As I recall, he was an older gentleman, and the experience would have taken place probably in the 30s or the 40s. So it would have been a time period when
That's why
this was, not.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
But I like to use this experience to show, that things as simple as just taking someone back and kissing them goodbye, an out-of-body experience can happen during such a normal social situation as that. Of course, there was some anxiety involved. I assume he was afraid that the father or the mother will come out of the girlfriend and there will be a tense situation there. He didn't say that. What I read you is the only report that I have. Another case is more of the near-death type, and this happens in an accident to a 49-year-old British man, which was a construction worker, and he was up there in the construction. He lost his balance, and he went headfirst through an asbestos roof. So the roof breaks, he's headfirst, and he writes, as his body was on the ground with a lot of pain, I saw a light and moved towards it, sailing through the wall, leaving my body behind. The movement was effortless and sublimely comfortable. The light was intense, without dazzle or scorch. It was love, joy, and perfection, and welcomed me unreservedly. So here we have, he feels the sensation of moving out, seeing this light, and having all these very positive emotions, which are very typical of near-death experiences. So people all of a sudden feel a big sense of peace and joy and kind of contentment with themselves and everything around them. Those two experiences are a near-death and an OBE. We will get in more detail later into other circumstances in which this experience is produced. But basically, the idea is you feel that you leave your body, and then you have perceptions and sensations of things that are happening close to you, to your physical body, or things that you experience in other places where people travel. And we'll talk more about those characteristics, those features later on. But before getting into that, we need to address the question of why are we interested in these phenomena? Why should we care about them? Why are they important? For a lot of people, the answer is, we don't care. They're not important. They're just, freak events, hallucinations, medical conditions, stuff that just doesn't have much meaning except to say that you had an aberration in your life or something went wrong. But through the years, people have been studying these experiences and arguing that there is more to that. It's not as simple to say that they are abnormal or different. They indicate all kinds of things for human beings. One of them is the whole idea of how do we define death. For a lot of people, these phenomena are what explain what death is all about. And that's what makes it so important for the public at large. So people that have had near-death experiences will argue that they know what death is because they were there. And they will tell you, as you see in the literature of spiritualism from the 19th century, and of course even much older texts from many different traditions, they will argue that death is a permanent out-of-body experience or a permanent near-death experience. You go out and you don't return, so then you die. And those that go out and return were never really dead, were close or near death. But as long as you return and you go on normally, you were never completely dead. Because it's very difficult to prove that scientifically, but that idea is one of the main issues of why do we care, why do we study this phenomena. Because if that is really what is happening, that will tell us a lot about the process of death and what happens later, and we may be able in a better position to prepare people, to deal with their transition. As you know, a lot of people are very afraid of death. Families and everyone that stays behind suffers a lot when someone goes. So if all these things were accepted and we could show they were true, certainly they will have a good impact in terms of people's well-being. Comfort, counseling. We will have more knowledge. We could tell people, this is what is happening, don't worry. Again, we cannot say that for sure, scientifically speaking, but people believe these things. And this is one of the main reasons why these phenomena have been studied through the years and we still pay attention to them. Another one is the relationship of these things to different types of psychic or parapsychological phenomena. People that have these experiences also have other types of psychic experiences, such as telepathy, seeing ghosts, that kind of thing. Also, during an out-of-body or a near-death experience, what we call parapsychological phenomena take place. Mainly when people go out of their bodies, see something at a different location, come back and later tell people saying, I was over there and I saw a car accident. And then later they go on and they check and they found, there was a car crash, and the person gives a clear description of it. The question is, how did you know? Well, I was there, I just took a flight, I went there, I saw it, I came back, and I'm just telling you what I saw. That's an example of what we call extrasensory perception, or acquiring information that you could not have acquired through normal means. Those things happen in a small number of cases while people say that they're out of their body. So there is there a connection between a form of psychic phenomena and the out-of-body experience. That's another reason why parapsychologists and spiritualists and a lot of other people study these experiences, to learn more about that connection. The whole idea that the mind functions apart from the physical body, philosophers, psychologists, have been discussing for years the whole mind-body relationship. If we could show that these experiences indicate a separation of the mind or other aspect of the human being, it will contribute to that argument. There are many other phenomena, such as what I call there deathbed observations of emanations from body at death. This is a phenomenon that sometimes is observed by nurses or by medical personnel that basically tell you, I see what happens at death. And these are people that are present, seeing the body of someone dying, and some people claim that they see a spirit living out of the body of the dying person, or that they see lights or strange things happening around that body. They are not extremely frequent cases, but if you start looking for them, you'll find that they are there, they can be found. And again, the whole idea comes back to the concept of something maybe leaving the body at death, which is the whole issue of the out-of-body and near-death experience. So there is another connection with these experiences, all these other observations that people sometimes make. Here we have a representation of these things, the process of death in a family setting. Someone is dying, there is a family around them, and the spirit, the soul, however you want to describe it, leaves the body at the moment of death. If that's what death is all about, it's very similar to what people are telling us that happens to them during a near-death or an out-of-body experience. And again, that is the connection that keeps people trying to document these experiences, trying to see if this is actually what is happening. Not everyone that studies these experiences thinks that that's actually what happens. There are people that are completely skeptical of anything really living, and we will get into that more at the end. But this is one of the motivating factors in getting to the study of these experiences, the implications that these things have. If this is the case, it's an extremely important thing to learn and document. It's nothing new, because certainly religion has been telling this us since the beginning of time. The movement of spiritualism and many other movements in occultism, this is exactly what they teach us. But in terms of bringing science and trying to document these things, that is the new contribution of these types of studies. And the research, in many ways, is motivated for this basic idea. But these are just some general concepts of why people are interested in these things. Not to mention the impact these experiences have on you, that we will get more into it later. A lot of people change their personalities, their family changes. They argue that even society at large can change when a lot of people have experiences of this sort. If that is the case, that argues a lot for the importance of these experiences. Just as we study the impact of trauma or other negative life events on you, we can study the impact these experiences have on you as well. That's another reason to be interested. But let's change now and go into the issue of what have we learned about this phenomena? What can be done with this phenomena? If we start with, let's start telling you, how do we get information to then learn something? On the one hand, we can learn a lot about these experiences from personal experience. That is, if you can have these experiences, and especially if you can have them repeatedly, you are exploring your own inner states and you learn about them. One of the first methods of exploration is through the induction of the experience in yourself. The problem is that not everyone can induce the experience. For some people, nothing seems to work. Other people have a few, others have it all the time. And it's a very difficult way of exploring the out-of-body experience. But through the years, a small number of people have been able to achieve control of out-of-body experiences and have documented that in books. That gives us a lot of information of how these things happen, what are the characteristics of the phenomena for that individual. Not all of those individuals are the same. And certainly when you read a lot of these different books, you find out that some of the experiences described for one individual are very different to the experiences described by another. To give you an example, in 1929, Sylvan Muldoon, which is one of the most famous astral projectors in the history of this subject, in 1929 he publishes a book, and the book is based on all that he learned through thousands of out-of-body experiences he had almost every night. He was a young man in Wisconsin, the beginning of the 20th century, that was kind of an ill constitution, and he had all these experiences kind of spontaneously. Eventually he learned to control them using a lot of techniques that he developed and that he records in this book. And he offers almost a manual of how to have an out-of-body experience and how this was for me. So he tells you all in great detail how his experiences happen. One of the things that he said is that he never went to different dimensions. That's very commonly described by some people that have out-of-body experiences, that instead of staying in the normal surroundings, they say they go to different worlds, to different dimensions, different places. For Muldoon, he always was in his bedroom, or he was able to visit someone around, but it was just normal environments. When you read other books, it's a complete different experience. They go to different planets, different dimensions, inside Earth, outside. They describe all kinds of different places. Clearly, we have here different experiences. Something to keep in mind when you read the books of these special people, that what they're saying is very instructive, but it's also a very individual perspective. It's like reading a travelogue of someone going to a different country. Depending on your personality, depending on your experience in life, on your attitude, your description of the south of France will be different from someone else's description. And that's exactly what we have here. A lot of individual aspects may be contributing to that, or many other factors that we still don't understand. There's too much that contributes to these experiences that we still have not identified the main factors. But the idea is that although all these books of special people are very valuable, they are also very different and they don't give us the whole picture. There's only one way of learning about this. And there are books like that also about near-death experiences. But near-death experiences tend to be a one-in-a-lifetime event. A few people have had more than one near-death experience, but in general you have only one, so you write your book about that single experience, such as the book by Betty Eady. She's a famous person that had a near-death experience, and then she has been lecturing all around. And so you have only one experience, but certainly it's hard to induce it again, because coming close to death, it's very dangerous to try to induce that again. Also, some people are tempted to do it. But again, that's the first method that we had of exploration was self-exploration, accounts of experience. We can do basically the same thing that these people do when they explore their own experience, but by collecting cases. That's, for example, what we have done in our own research, is that we ask people to send us accounts of out-of-body experience. And the idea is I want to collect as many cases of near-death or out-of-body experiences so that then I can do an analysis of, say, 50 cases, 100, or if you can get much more, that's even better. One of the projects that we did in Scotland was writing newspapers and asking the readers of newspapers, have you ever had an out-of-body experience? And we have a kind of a description and ask people, please write to us. If you have had this experience, let us know. That's a way of getting cases. In that study, we got only about 88 experiences. It's better if you can get even more, but those 88 were extremely rich and detailed experiences. And when we got it, we asked them to write us a very detailed account, and then we send a questionnaire, a very long questionnaire that asks all kinds of details about the experience. So you get as much as you can from people's accounts. You can also interview them, you can visit them in their homes, depending on how much money you have to travel all over the country, because a lot of these people come from all around. Our sample was mainly from people from Scotland and some from England down there. And it was not possible for us to go all around and interview everyone. But we got them through correspondence. That's one way of doing it. Kenneth Ring published a book in 1980 called Life at Death. And he has there, I believe there were 102 experiences that he collected also from different places. People that he knew have had experience, people that he asked around when he was giving lectures, people that belonged to certain associations. He collected in many different ways and eventually had enough experience to do a good analysis, and he published this book full of statistical analysis of different aspects of the near-death experience. Do women have different experiences than men? He analyzed all that in great detail. And he was able to interview a lot of the people and has a lot of transcripts and a lot of good data about it. That's another way that we have done to learn about these things. We do surveys. You send out questionnaires. You kind of select a sample, of the represents the general population, and you send out 1,000 questionnaires or 10,000, depending on the resources that you have. And when you get the information back, you have a lot of data there that you can analyze in different ways. We did a survey that was basically based on readers of a Spanish magazine. We found a magazine published in Barcelona, in Spain, and they were kind enough to publish for free a 2-page questionnaire asking for all kinds of psychic experiences, but with emphasis on out-of-body experience. We ended getting 492 replies back, which is a good return, but think that the magazine had about 50,000 circulation. So there were a lot of people that saw it all through Spain and in some other countries. Not all of those 492 had out-of-body experience, but about 73% of them did. And that's a very high prevalence of out-of-body experiences, because this is a very special magazine This is a magazine about New Age paranormal topics. So almost everyone reading that magazine believe in this phenomena, had experiences. So that's why we got so many replies. But again, that's a way of doing a survey with a particular group. Everyone gets the same questions, and then they answer, and they will tell you yes or no. And it's as important to have the yeses or the nos, as we will get later when we see the data. But that's another way, and that's the most frequently used way today, survey, to learn about the out-of-body and the near-death experience. And finally, we like in science to have sometimes as much control as possible, and that's why we do laboratory studies. What we try to do there is bring the person to the laboratory and see, can we have an out-of-body experience in the laboratory? And the answer is yes for some people, but you need people that are able to produce, to induce these things almost at will. So the day when they come to the lab, they need to be able to sit down or lie down and say, I'm going to have the experience now. And what the researcher does is that when the person is having the out-of-body experience, if they are successful, because that doesn't happen all the time, then they have a lot of tests around. They ask the people, well, go to a different room and tell me what is the picture that I put there on top of a table. So the person flies over there, looks and tries to see the picture, tries to memorize what he or she is seeing, comes back and then says, I saw a picture of an animal or a house or something. That's one type of experiment that can be done. But you can do many things. You can do electroencephalographic experiments, so you measure the brain waves of the person while they're having the out-of-body experience. There are many things that you can do, but the whole idea is control the environment, have a task that you're asking that person to do. Very few people are able to do it. At the American Society for Psychical Research, there were some, that is here in New York on the west side, there were in the 1970s some very interesting tests that Dr. Carlis Osis, a parapsychologist, was doing with a very talented psychic called Alex Thanos. Alex Thanos was a very good psychic that was able to do a lot of phenomena on demand. And one of his talents was out-of-body experience. So he decided to cooperate with Osis and with the society, and he will go in, will lie down, and they will do anything they wanted to him while he was going out. But he had a lot of control of his experiences. That's hard to find. We have a video that we're going to show you later of Thanos doing some of these tests. Obviously, it's very hard to do experimental or laboratory work with near-death experiences. Because you cannot bring someone to the lab and say inject them with a lethal drug, and at the moment that they're dying, ask them, get out of your body. Now you certainly can do that, but the ethical implications, are obvious. We see sometimes on TV a lot of these fictional movies, like I believe Flatliners was one, where a group of medical students were trying to do that. They all were medical students, so they were already trained in medical procedures. One of them volunteered, will lie down, they will bring the person close to death, and then will resuscitate them. But of course the problem is, can you bring that person back? And that's where you start losing people, and that's where the experiment just doesn't work, So you really cannot do experimental work with near-death experiences. You have to depend on reports, on surveys, on other kinds of methods. And that has to be accepted as a fact of life. There are many phenomena that you just cannot induce in people, period. It's unethical, it's impossible to do, too dangerous, and that kind of limits sometimes what we can do, but it's the same with many other phenomena in life. They happen in certain contexts, and you have to study them in their own context. But that, in a general way, is how we get information. What I'm going to do now is get into the out-of-body experience literature and tell you what are some of the things that we have found. But even before that, I would like to give you a few other cases so that you get a better feeling of how do people talk about an out-of-body experience when they are having the experience. I have another interesting case of a 31-year-old woman, also from Scotland. This was a study we did in Scotland. And this person had 4 previous out-of-body experiences. So this is the 5th one. And it happened while the person was sleeping. Okay, she wrote, I was asleep in my bed having a lie-in. I felt the familiar sensation of beginning to rise out of my body. I tried to pull myself back into my body, but to no avail. Then I was floating and I left the room. I cannot remember if I passed through a closed door or the door was open. I feel I may have passed through one of two doors because I entered the hall after leaving my bedroom, and then I entered the sitting room. I could see everything clearly. I floated towards the window and I could see out. I was quite high up because the window had a unit in front of it, and I felt I was going to pass through the window, but I don't think I wanted to. Suddenly a strange, terrible thing happened. As I was going to pass through the window, something enveloped me like two arms clasping my out-of-body self from behind. I actually felt like I was struggling against something physical. I didn't see what it was. Next thing, I was yanked back into my physical body. I lay as my physical body woke up, and then I dressed quickly and left the house. I have never had an out-of-body experience since. So here you have a very interesting experience that had a negative aspect into it. The person felt that they were grabbed and felt that they were pulled back. There are sometimes frightening things that happen in experiences. What was pulling her back is difficult to say, but it's not necessarily an entity or something grabbing her. A lot of people that have out-of-body experiences feel that they are just coming back to the body, and sometimes in a really violent way. Some people believe that the body needs you to come back, and that's why there is kind of a pull. That may have been what she experienced. It's hard to say, but it shows, one of the interesting features of this thing, the sensations that people feel. Not only are you out of the body and looking at, there are other things as sensations of being dragged along. Another case is one of normal repetitive activity, which is a type of case that is less frequent and less known. Again, this happened to a Scottish woman that was working on her garden. She was 33 years old at the time, and she writes, "I was completely carried away. I was so happy after about 1.5 hours with digging," she was digging in the garden, "and I felt myself rising into my head like not connected to my body anymore. Floated there for a while, think only a few moments, then suddenly I was outside my body, looking down on it. A distant away, I didn't think this was strange. I knew exactly who I was and what I was, and I was me. The real me. I knew that my body was part of me, but was not the real me. I felt extremely contented and fulfilled. My body, meanwhile, was actually carrying on by itself digging. This is what actually confused me. A thought came into my head. How could I possibly be up there and I was just back into my body in a flash?" That's the end of the case. What is interesting in this case is that the person is out of the body, sees her body down, but her physical body is doing an activity, a physical activity. She sees herself digging, working on the dirt, planting in the garden. But her consciousness is not in her body, it's out there. These type of cases where people see their physical bodies continuing doing physical activities are fascinating, but are not extremely common. It's a very small percent of the cases that you find in the literature that are like that. I have found several cases myself, but only about 4. I would say they are certainly less than 5%. I will put it around maybe 2-3%, but that varies on your sample. The interesting thing is the feature that in many cases people continue going on. And the physical behavior that people engage in is usually one that is automatic, such as digging, walking, riding a bicycle, driving a car. There are cases of out-of-body experiences of people driving a car at great speeds. And the next thing they know, they're out here looking at themselves, the car keeps going, the person keeps the steering wheel completely normal, and they don't have a crash. Because you don't know what will happen if the experience will go on for a long time. Usually these are very short experiences. A few seconds or 30 seconds by self-estimation. You know, no one is there with a chronometer, so we really don't know. But also people ride bicycles and are able to keep the balance, in the bike, turn around, do things. Some people lecture, are talking like I'm doing now, moving their hands, looking at the audience, and then they are up there and they look at themselves talking, and they keep on talking, and when they ask the audience later, they say, no, you sounded good, you didn't sound incoherent, you didn't. So you are able, or your physical body is able to go on some occasions, carrying on the task that you were doing before. But these are repetitive actions. It's very rare that you get a case where you have to do, say, some creative act or something that is not automatic, something that you have not done a lot. And remember, lecturing can be automatic if you are experienced talking to groups. It can be considered as automatic as driving or walking or doing all kinds of things. But again, these are very, very rare cases. In one of the cases that I got, one lady was walking a dog. And she says she was out there, and she says, I see this lady walking a dog with a very ugly raincoat and very bad hair. And then she said, oh, but that's me. How can this be? And she watches that for a few seconds, astounded, but saying, well, but there she is, and the dog, and me with the ugly hair, the ugly raincoat. And all of a sudden, she perceives her surroundings from her physical body. And she looks around and she realizes, well, I was there, but I'm here. She couldn't explain it, but that was basically her experience. And what is interesting is she says in the account that later that when she came back, she threw away her raincoat and she went to the beauty parlor immediately. And after that, observing the physical appearance is kind of typical in some of these cases, also in the near-death experience cases. Patients in hospitals, they look at and they say, I look so bad, I didn't have lipstick, or my hair is bad, or I didn't shave, or I look terrible, and they have a lot of concern for that. It's an interesting detail. Okay, if we have the first transparency here, we are entering now into the actual research results. What have we learned from research? The first thing is the prevalence. How common is the out-of-body experience? Is it very rare or not? Well, you have here, these three black bars are three different types of groups that surveys have been done with. People are asked if they have had an out-of-body experience. There are different ways of asking. The one that really tells us the commonality of this experience is the first one, that is 10%. Because those are the studies, and we have only 5 studies like that. The studies that are really done in ways that will represent the general population. That means you take a sample in a random way, you use all the techniques that have been developed from the social sciences to have information that represents either the population of that particular town or the whole country that you are sampling. The other ones are very special groups, such as the 48% with people in the parapsychology group are people that take parapsychology courses, people maybe like yourselves, that are very interested in this phenomena, people that practice, psychic development, very special people that will attract a high number of individuals that have had all kinds of psychic experiences. That's why it's so high in these special groups. With college students, which is the middle one, most of the studies are done with college students today because it's easier to do them by the hundreds or the thousands. You have 25% with 49 studies. There is also fairly high. 25% is extremely high. But the real number, I would say, is 10% or maybe 8 to 10%. That's what I would say is the figure that really represents how common these experiences are. Think, how many people are we talking when we say 10% of the population of the United States or of any country that you're familiar with? We're talking about a lot of people. We're talking about millions of people in the world that are having these experiences, assuming these figures are correct. A lot of other phenomena that receive a lot of attention and a lot of funding, such as schizophrenia, which is estimated to be about 2% of the general population, is much less than what we estimate an out-of-body experience to be. So these things are very, very common when you project them, to people out there. Yet, a lot of these phenomena are not discussed in psychology textbooks, in the textbooks of psychiatry, in the textbooks of disciplines that should know about human experience in general. That's a problem that we have, even with all these studies. That's changing quickly because a lot of these studies are starting to be cited into all that literature, into all those textbooks, but that's still not the case. But anyhow, we have learned that these things are by no means rare. 10% is not trivial. In fact, even 5% is not trivial at all. When you project to everyone here in New York City, everyone here in Manhattan, if you say 10%, you're talking about a lot of people. If you go out there and you start asking around, you will find people yourself that have had this experience. And then you can conduct all the same type of study. Another thing that we have learned from reading cases, from collecting cases, is what were people doing while they were having the out-of-body experience. And as you could see from the accounts that I was reading, there's all kinds of things people were doing. On one hand, on the top, we talk about relaxation, on the bottom about tension. So all this stuff from meditation, resting, sleep, all these are relaxed states. On the bottom part, accidents, on the physical abuse, surgery, all are extremely tense states. And tension refers from physical to also mental tension. Because there are many, for example, when we say about being close to death, being close to death means many different things. One possible definition, that's one of the things that we get when we study near-death experiences, is being close to death means that your organism is failing in its functions and you are going to die physically soon. Say your heart is not working well and soon it will stop beating. That's a more physiological definition of closeness to death. But there is a psychological definition where you believe that you are going to die soon. If I pull a gun right now and put it up in your face, you are going to think, I'm going to die in 5 seconds or less. That's another definition of being close to death. You believe that you are going to die. When you are driving and your car gets stuck on the train tracks and you cannot get the car out and you look and there comes the Amtrak train towards you, you could say, I'm close to death because that thing is going to hit me and this will be the end. However, physically, you're fine. Your heart, your brain, everything is working fine until that thing hits. But before that, you are psychologically, you are thinking, I am going to die. And it's very difficult in cases in real life to make a distinction between that physiological definition of closeness to death or the psychological one. And sometimes they intermingle, and sometimes we even have evidence that you don't have to be medically close to death to have some of these experiences. Just believing is enough. So again, we get all these things in a combination that in real life is very difficult, if not impossible, to untangle. So this depends only on, you have to observe each case on its own. People use drugs and they have the out-of-body experiences. Voluntary induction refers to those few people that have the ability of producing these things at will. Those people exist. We have in this library several books written by people like that. Muldoon was the one in point. There is a man in Brazil called Valdo Vieira that has written a lot about how he can induce these experiences. Robert Bruce, a man from Australia that has become very famous recently. He published a big book on all his experiences. Bob Peterson, William Bolham. Those are the new astral projectors, the new generation of people that are writing right now, are doing seminars all around the country right now on their own out-of-body experiences and to teach people to have the experience at will. So there is a number of people that can have it. When you do surveys, you find out that they tend to be about 5% or something like that can do it at will. And then if you start asking, can you do it at will all the time? You get a 1% or sometimes even less than that. And then sometimes, some of the time, then you get a few more people. But it's not such a common skill. But it happens, and some of these people claim that they can teach that to you. On the other hand, the normal activities, those are the people that are walking, just talking. So as you can see, it's kind of a whole different combination of possibilities. from things that are sudden, like a car crash, to just reading a book in your house. They vary a lot. That's the importance of collecting cases that represent all the different circumstances under which experience happened. So once we have a good database with all that cases from all the different conditions, then we can start doing good research by comparing them. Like you can compare, well, is there a difference between the relaxed ones and the ones under high tension? And you compare them in terms of men and women, or the type of things that they saw, how far away they say they left from their body. You can ask hundreds of questions, but the main idea is to have all this information first. Then, of course, one of the things that research tries to tell us, or we do research for, is what are the features of the OBE? That means, what do people experience once they left their body, the things that they feel or see or hear? And this is from our study in Scotland, the ones that I was telling you that we asked for different newspapers. And this is the slide that shows the most frequent experiences. So floating sensations, 71%. Most people stay in the normal surroundings, as opposed to leaving their normal surroundings. Some other people say they go to different dimensions or spiritual worlds. They have a lot of different descriptions, some of them fascinating. But the majority of people, in this case 69%, stayed in the bedroom, or maybe went to the kitchen, or if they left the house, they went to their parents' house. But there are environments that are of this earth and places that they know most of the time. Seeing their physical body, 65%. And that's a very important feature, because seeing the body is basically what tells people that they are out of their physical body. A lot of people do not feel that they are leaving the body. They just kind of almost open their eyes, and they are there, and they know there is something different when they see their body lying down. And that's when they say, but what is this? I'm out of my body. That's in a way, that's the most important indicator for people. As well, floating sensations is another one. Seeing the surroundings from above, a good number of people are floating up. Others are at the same level of the body or sometimes down, but most of the time you're floating up there looking down. That's the most common report. Some people have sensations of rising or leaving the body. Those are the people that have a transition. You feel like you are starting to float and slowly leave until you feel that you are completely out. But again, there are many other people that they are just out instantly. The physical body, they sometimes are paralyzed. They cannot move. And that's another interesting feature. They're aware of sensations returning to the body, and a few others. The next one has the more rare ones in this study. It's the same study. And for example, let's take the first one. Consciousness oscillated between the out-of-body location and the physical body, 1%. Those are cases where you have the experience, you are out of the body, and your mind, your awareness is out there. But then, the next second, your mind is in the physical body again, and sometimes goes out again. That's what I mean by oscillation. There is a movement, and it's not very common, but it's fascinating when you read the descriptions. It's like you are here, you are there, you're here, you are there. Like there cannot be a lock into a particular place. It's kind of unstable, and it goes from one place to the other. That's fascinating, but kind of rare. The second one is one of the classic astral projection features, and it's seeing a connection, like a cord or a ribbon, between you that is out there and your physical body. The account is that you are out there, and then you look at yourself and you see that there is like a luminous cord coming from you, mainly sometimes from this region, goes out from here and connects with the physical body. As you can see, that's not very common in this study. It's more common in the older accounts of out-of-body experience, especially in spiritualist books. In astral projection theory, the idea is that's what keeps you alive. That all the energy that is in that body out there is still being transmitted to the physical body, and you have that connection when you're alive, and if that cord is broken, then you are dead. But the cord is not, it's not universally reported by any means, as you can see. Especially recent studies find almost no accounts of that. You have to go to the old literature to find it. So it's hard to say. So when I tell that to people, some people say, oh yeah, but the cord is there, but it's invisible. Well, that's true. It could be invisible, but it's, when things are invisible, you don't know if they're really there or not. Some people don't see the cord. They feel sensations. So again, that's kind of one of the mysteries of out-of-body experience that needs to be studied more. And then, people hear sounds, they see images. As you can see, everything here is 5% or less. They are much less frequent. But it is to show you how many different things are reported within the out-of-body experience. And this is by no means covers everything. There's many, many other features. And each person is unique. There are people that have experiences that others do not have. But in general, there is a pattern. In general, what you see here more or less holds overall. So there is order, there is a constancy in a lot of these features that you can find, which lets us to know that this is a real phenomenon, and like many other things that we study, dreams or other experiences in life, there is a lot there to catalog and classify, and that the more we do these things, the more we will learn, and eventually we will be able to understand them much better, which is the whole purpose of this cataloging. Fred, the thing about your paralysis, that certainly that happens to a lot of people, especially at the beginning of the out-of-body experience. They're going to have the experience, and then they notice as they're lying in bed, a big proportion of these things, people are lying down. The first thing you notice is you cannot move. And then you get afraid, you say, what is this? I'm going to die, I'm having a stroke. Or you start thinking of all possible, an epileptic attack. People bring any medical condition they know, they start thinking, because it's very frightening, you just cannot move. And then slowly, they start feeling rising. Some people hear noises like wind, water noises in their ears, all kinds of strange things that contribute to them thinking they're having a stroke, because it's very frightening. And then slowly there is a transition, and then you lose the sensation in the body, and the sensation passes to a different location out there. But at the beginning, they cannot move. Paralysis also sometimes happens to some people on return. They come back to the body, and once they are inside the body, they try to get up, and they find that they are also paralyzed. This man that I mentioned, Sylvan Muldoon, that was one of his, he called it catalepsy, which is, it's an old term, comes before. He also talked about astral catalepsy. I'll get that in a minute. But in the catalepsy of the physical body was exactly that. He came back, he couldn't move. And over the years, since this happened so frequently, he developed a technique that was going to focus all my attention and energy into one finger. And I'm going first to try to move this little finger. And he was able to do that. And then it was another finger, then the hand, then the arm. And of course, he probably was there like an hour or something doing it. But eventually, he recovered the use of the body. And the more he did it, the more he was able to. He was very good in handling his will. He developed amazing ways of focusing the will and doing things in the out-of-body state in ways that almost no one after him has been able to. He was a very special person. He also talked about astral catalepsy, meaning that lack of movement could happen also not only in the physical body, but once you were out of the body. Basically, he was out there floating, but he couldn't move. He was almost like a dummy, like that. And he says he felt floating. That happened when especially close to the physical body. And he said he was floating, and he just couldn't do anything except being there, observe things, and wait for the experience to end. On other occasions, he was able to move more, but he said it also happened out there. So that's basically for the movement. For the persons in death row, certainly interesting things could be done if someone is going to be executed anyhow, and they agree. There will be many interesting things that perhaps could be done to monitor the physiology. Or the problem there will be, since a person is being executed, they will not be coming back. They will not revive them, or unless they will tell them.
Governor could issue a
or unless they will tell them, look, you're going to be executed, so you're going to die at some point. But the first 2 or 3 are going to be fake deaths. So we're going to let you go and bring you back, let you go and bring you back, and see if you remember being out there and seeing the light and seeing, your grandmother. Certainly you could do that, but I will doubt that that will be accepted in terms of, human suffering, and because even for a criminal, you will be putting the person into a lot of ups and downs. And
I didn't think that far along the question.
yeah, I should say that there are some people in the old days that have done what we may call more experimental tests, but they basically involve attempts to measure something leaving the body. Let me give you, these are fascinating historical examples. There was a doctor called Duncan McDougall that was in Boston, and in 1907 he published a paper that he claimed showed experimental evidence of the soul as a substance, as a measurable substance, those were his words, leaving the body at the moment of death. And what it occurred to him to do was, I'm a doctor in a hospital, he said, I have access to people that are dying. So what he wanted to do was to weight the body and see if there was a loss in body weight at the moment of death. And what he did was he got the whole, I assume also the report is not very clear, that he got permission from the person or their family. He got the whole bed into a balance. He describes the machine that he used. It was a machine in use in the beginning of the century. Okay. And the idea was, he balanced this thing. It was one of those old things that you had to put the balance, and if there was a change in weight, then the thing will move. So he waited for the person to die once the thing was balanced. And he claimed that there were some very small, like a few ounces in each. He had about 5 or 6 patients, that when they expire, and again, he didn't have any exact way of determining this is the moment of death, but it was most of the time when they basically did a sound and they fell down, and then later they touched them and they were gone. He claimed that around that moment there were a few losses. He also did the same with dogs. He got a few dogs, and this he put to death, with drugs. And he also claimed that there were a few changes like that.
But they would exhale, so they would lose the oxygen.
Well, yeah, that's a very good point, because that was one of the things that McDougall considered, and to get around that, and that he put himself in the bed, and he basically put out as much air as he could. He put it in and out, and then he went, put it all out, and tried to see if it will show the changes. And he says that he was never able to reproduce the loss of weight. He also thought that maybe there could be urine or some evaporation or something body. He was trying to think of any possible normal physiological thing at the time. I assume that now there could be other things maybe that, more precise. But at the time he couldn't find an explanation. So in his opinion, there was so that's just a historical example. I don't know anyone that has done that, especially with human beings in recent times. And people have tried over the years to take pictures at the moment of death, and most of those pictures have never shown anything. There are a few that have shown very interesting effects. But again, what's happening there is never very clear. And these are very old experiments with very old cameras. It would be great to use the technology that we have now with infrared, with all kinds of fields that we can detect in different ways. Put someone that is dying inside a lot of the chambers that physicists use, for all kinds of studies, and see if they are environmental, from electrical to other types of changes. Certainly, a lot of things could be done, but no one wants to do that type of research for the obvious ethical reasons, or putting people into suffering. Families will not allow it. There are all kinds of issues like that. But certainly, in principle, as she brings up, it's possible to do tests. And some people say, let's go and do it with animals, which again is problematic, because there are also ethical issues of research with animals, but that's another story.
Have you considered doing research in emergency rooms or ICUs where the percentage of near deaths is high?
Yeah, some people have done that, and they basically go there to try to find cases as they are happening, and then have all the medical documentation. And some people have interesting data on that. But again, not every hospital, not every place is open to that. You know, this field of study still, a lot of physicians don't want to get into that. You know, they think it's nonsense. Or people are worried that the hospital will get the reputation of being the death hospital. You know, so the media will start calling it, you know, the spirit world hospital. They will still, you know, they will do all this kind of publicity stuff that hospital administrators really don't like. So it's difficult. But it has been done in a few places, and I think we're going to see more of that in the future.
Are you familiar with the Free Soul organization in Sedona, Arizona? I have gotten some tapes from them where that I've actually gotten training in what I would call achieving an out-of-body experience. Where, as best as I can recall, I did this a couple of years ago, you move up your consciousness from your feet all the way up through your body until you reach a certain point in your head. And then, as best as I can recall, they describe it as leaping into a place up here in your consciousness. And that sounds very similar to an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
And the training is done with tapes and with just instructions.
Yeah. You know, I'm not familiar with them, but there are many other organizations or individuals that have similar approaches. A lot of people use, the commonality there are relaxation and visualization and concentration type techniques. And inside that, there's a lot of variety, but there are many techniques for the induction of out-of-body experiences. None of these techniques works 100%. That's something that we know, you know, because obviously, you know, not everyone has them. But it seems to work in a few number of people. My guess of what is happening, and we really lack organized control research, but my guess is that all these techniques interact with the innate ability that you have. So if you bring some ability, and then there are other physiological and psychological, and maybe many other aspects that we still don't know, aspects present in you, then certain techniques will be effective. The technique interacts with what you bring with you. But the technique by itself cannot guarantee the production of the experience. I think that's why, you know, the people that are more sensitive, more predisposed, have more the experience than others. But certainly, I think a lot of these things, with more study, we may be able to induce them more reliably. Well, we should return now and get a little more into the features. If we go to the next transparency, this is another transparency that I downloaded from the web. The internet, you know, has a lot of great information about out-of-body experiences. And this is basically an example that I found of a person that has out-of-body experiences and floats over their physical body, but they feel that they're connected to the physical body by something like a rod or something like that. It could be a cord or anyhow, they feel that they're connected in that way, and then their body up there starts rotating, going around. I have not seen this described anywhere else, but it's a feature, you know, it's a type of experience that this person had. And I'm just showing you to illustrate how interesting and how the variety of features, you know, so many things that can be found when you study these things. The next one, this is from an older book, The Phenomena of Astral Projection, published in 1951, which is a book that brought together a lot of cases. The whole point was to illustrate the variety of the out-of-body experience. And this is a case of someone that said that they felt they left through the head, and the person did a drawing illustrating their sensations and their feelings. Certainly it's not that it happened exactly like this, but it's an attempt to show how they felt that they went out from a small part of the head and started going out, and then they felt their shape develop up there. We found in some of these survey studies that some people claim that when they leave the body, they leave from the head. Others leave from their whole body. You know, you feel your whole body, a sensation of coming from the whole body. Others feel that they leave more from the center of the body. It varies. And we still don't know the reasons for those differences, which is why, you know, a lot of us want to continue these types of studies, because all these things are great and are fascinating, but we do not know why there are differences among them. The next one. And some of the research that we do is addressed to answer why there are differences between experiences and what factors may account for them. This is a study that we did. This is the one done in Scotland, only 88 people. And basically, what we are doing here is the black bars are the people that believe that they were close to death while they had their out-of-body experience, and the gray bar where they were not close to death. They did not have that belief. And what we found out is that those that were close to death or believed they were close to death had higher rates of, say, seeing spirits, seeing lights, and a few other things like seeing the physical body. The importance of this research is that we are combining the actual things that people experience with something else. And this something else is the belief that you are near death or not. So the whole idea is, do belief that you are about to die affect the content of the experience? That is what this study is trying to document. And we find that in some features, there is a relationship that we can show statistically that these two, the near death and non-near death, seem to affect the content of the experience. Of course, this type of study, you can never say this is causing that. We cannot make that claim, but we can show that there is a relationship there. And this study is a replication of a previous study. This study was just published in a psychiatry journal recently, and at least there are 2 studies now on record showing this same relationship. And the idea is that you as a scientist want to understand, why do people have different experiences? How can we account for these things? And this is the type of thing that we do, trying to combine variables and see what's happening. Another thing that we try to do is say sex differences. Do women experience things differently from men? Yes or no? It makes sense because, say, when you study dreams, the way people dream, there are very clear sex differences in the things that people dream. Men have more aggression and sex in their dreams than women. That has been found all around the world, in India, in Brazil, in the United States, everywhere. And they are using the same questionnaires. That's very stable finding. So if things like that can happen in dreams, maybe it could also happen in out-of-body experiences. But when we do it by sex, sex doesn't seem to be an important variable in out-of-body experiences. Again, more studies need to be done, but up to now, we have not found that out. In the next one, we do a similar thing from our study in Spain. We had 492 people in general, but this is less. This is probably like 300 people only. And the idea here are, we divide people in 2 groups. Those that said that they went to different surroundings, meaning things such as different dimensions, environments, places that they visited while out of the body that they could not recognize. And you have those people versus the people that were in similar surroundings, and that means you stay in your bedroom or in your house or in your neighborhood, places that you know. And we also find different there that those that say that they went to different dimensions, different places, have higher rates of all of those things than those that stay in the same place. This is information that starts allowing us to create typologies, classifications of out-of-body experiences. So basically, we could say, well, there is a type of experience of the other dimension that you have this type of other things, and of this world that you see less of these features. Research like this allows us to classify these things in more detail. And the whole idea is to start understanding. Once we form a clear map of what happens when, we can start creating better theories to try to explain what is happening. And then learn more about it. Because if not, we will always stay only at the level, 20% see lights. That's nice, but we don't learn anything by just saying that some people see lights. We have already known that for years. We have to learn more about how variables, how different things interact. And maybe eventually we can learn to control these experiences better and understand them in more detail. There is another aspect that is of great interest to parapsychologists, and those are the features of out-of-body experiences that seem to give you information, the things that I mentioned before. Let me give you one case, an old case from a book published in 1936, the case for astral projection by Sylvan Muldoon. He records the case of a man that had out-of-body experiences, and just before having this experience, he was thinking, I would like to know what happened to this old friend of mine that I have not seen in years. The next thing he knows, as he relaxes, he feels he has his out-of-body experience, he travels, and he finds himself in a distant place that he later found to be California, and he was on the East Coast. His physical body was on the East Coast, but he finds himself in California at a place where the man was. And he was able to find that the man was involved in drugs and in things, with the law, all kinds of problems. And when he comes back, he later can verify that. He did inquiries and he found that his friend was over there and he was having problems with drugs, with the law. So this is one example where being out of the body allows you to get information, something that was happening in a distant place. You bring it back, you wake up in your body, you have some information you didn't have before. You can call that extrasensory perception, veridical perception. There are many, many possible names. Excuse me. But the idea is that during these states, this phenomena can happen. That's another feature of the out-of-body experience, but not a very common one. Certainly it's much less than 5%, 2, 3, 4 in some of the studies. Another very interesting one that we will call a very parapsychological feature is the one of apparitions. An apparition in psychical research and parapsychology means something that appears before you, a vision, a ghost. There are different types of apparition, but a lot of people say that they see apparitions of the dead. So that's when you see a vision of someone in your family that has died, your parents, one of them appears there in visual form, stays for a few seconds and disappears. That's what we call an apparition of the dead. Some of those cases could be just pure hallucinations. We don't know. Some of the cases have to be investigated in detail. A lot of the time it's impossible to make a difference. But some of the apparitions that people see are not apparitions of dead people, are apparitions of people that are still alive. And for our purposes, what interests us is that there are certain types of apparitions of the living that the person that is seen is a person that is having an out-of-body experience. The idea is, I'm leaving my body, I appear in my cousin's house in Boston, my cousin turns around and he will see me standing there, and I will see him looking at me. So you have this double aspect, a person in this location, you are here, you travel over here, you stand here, you're aware you are in a new place, and that this person is here looking at you. The person sees you, you see the person, you are both aware of each other. And then you either return or lose consciousness, the experience ends. The person here says, wow, what happened? They usually think that you are dead. Let me read you a very short case like that I collected in Scotland. This is a woman that lives up in Scotland, close to Edinburgh, and she has a sister that lives down in England, far away. And she says, I woke in the early hours of the morning. This is the sister in England. And saw my sister standing beside the bed. It was like seeing a ghost in black and white and sort of see-through. I did not know how to respond, so after a couple of minutes, when she just stood there, I closed my eyes and drifted back to sleep. So this is the sister in bed that sees her sister standing there. At the same time, the sister in Scotland had the experience of leaving her body and visiting there. So we have this combination. These cases are rare and difficult to find today, but they exist. And in the old literature, when you check some of the old books and some of the journal articles that we have here, you can find a lot of great old cases like that. What is happening there? There's still a lot of debate about the actual process, but certainly what people believe is that the person left and just appeared there, and that's why they were seen. These cases are important to document because if we can document them and show that they are really happening, we can certainly see that the experience was more than just imagination on the part of either of them. I had more correspondence with the lady that saw the apparition, and it was very interesting because I sent her a lot of questions. She certainly was a sensitive person in the sense that she had ability to experience all kind of parapsychological experiences. I sent her a long question on many different types. Have you had dreams about the future? Have you seen apparitions other than this one that we're talking about? And she said, yes, and she made a lot of descriptions of things. So here is a person that has all kinds of different psychic experiences, clearly has a sensitivity, and is able to see that. In most cases, where you are visiting a different person, people do not realize that you are there. And if they bump into you, they go through you, you go through the walls, no one, you must have seen things like that on TV, when people die or sometimes they have their ghosts trying to get the phone and they cannot. It's similar, the people that talk about these things say they cannot interact with the environment and they can never make anyone see them, except in very few cases like this one. So these cases are important for the obvious reason that it shows, that there is something happening there, some type of communication that cannot be explained only by saying, it was hallucination or it was. The final explanation we still don't know, but these are the type of cases that really show or indicate that there is something more that needs to be studied. And again, these are the type of cases that parapsychologists are very interested and they want to focus on for the obvious reasons because they're so different and they have great implications in our understanding of this phenomenon. But there is more, and that is, other than the features of the cases, this going out, being seen, or feeling you are floating, we have learned many other things in our research. And a lot of our research, the research that Nancy and I have done, has been involved with this aspect, which is what is the psychological profile, the personality of the person that has these experiences. And when you do, you basically compare people that had out-of-body experiences with people that did not have out-of-body experience, and you give them all kinds of psychological measures, questionnaires and scales that psychologists use in research that is not related to parapsychology or to this phenomena. And one of the findings that we have done, and other people have also found out, is that the people that have out-of-body experience, which is the top black line, have more parapsychological experiences in general than those that do not have out-of-body experiences, which is the lower line. Each point is a different phenomenon. Let's see, the first one that says LUC, those are lucid dreams. Lucid dreams is a particular type of dream that while you are having a dream, inside the dream, you realize you have consciousness inside the dream that you are dreaming. And then you say, I'm dreaming. This is a dream. And then you are still dreaming. You look around and you realize these images are part of my dream. Isn't that nice? And then some people are very surprised. Others take it as a matter of fact. In a very small percent, people can control their dreams. But that's a subset of the lucid dream people. Control meaning that saying, okay, I'm in a dream. Let me take that vacation to Paris that I wanted to take for years. And they go to Paris, they're standing in front of the tower, the museum, this and that. But this is very small number of people that they can do all kinds of things that they want, including feeling all kinds of physical sensations, sexual sensations. I mean, that's really another field and another lecture, but it's related to the out-of-body experience in the sense that it's a very strong experience full of imagery. So the people that have out-of-body experiences tend to have more lucid dreams than the people that do not have out-of-body experience. And also apparitions, having precognitive dreams, waking EXP experiences, an experience when you're awake and you feel that you get information through an intuition or you see a vision that tells you something is happening at a distance. All these kinds of things are what parapsychology study under the name of extrasensory perception. People that have all these psychic experiences have more out-of-body experiences. And the same for the others, or seeing auras or lights or energy fields around people. That's another parapsychological experience. You look at someone and you see like a field of energy or a light coming from the head, from other parts of the body. People that see auras have more out-of-body experiences. All these experiences are interrelated. That's something that research has taught us. And it's not only when you classify them by those that have OBEs or those that do not have. You can do the same with those that see auras or not, or it's those that have telepathic dreams or not. The research shows us that people that have any parapsychological experience tend to have other types of parapsychological experiences as well. This is not on a one-to-one correspondence. We're talking about statistical trends. That means that you will find many exceptions here and there. But overall, you could say 60, 70% of the people will fit this profile. Maybe less, depending. But again, that's one of the findings.
What's MYS?
Mystical experiences.
Yeah, MIS is mystical experiences, religious experiences, mainly of people that feel that their sense of self expands and they become part of nature, part of everything around them. That's part of what mystical experiences are about. And the question that we used was that you feel that you blend with your surroundings, that you are part of nature, part of God, part of all the other human beings.
Excuse me, and the PK, what is that?
PK is psychokinesis. Those are physical phenomena. Psychokinesis is mind over matter. As you can see, the psychokinesis is kind of a little less than some of the others. But overall, you find the relationship, and this you find in almost every study. We have done several studies like this, and we always find this pattern, and other people have also found it. So clearly we're dealing with a general sensitivity there. The next one, please. And that's the whole point of the... Okay, well, before getting to this, I should say that, hold that one for a while. That it's not only with psychic experiences, but with many other types of experiences. Psychologists, psychiatrists have developed all kinds of constructs to understand human experiences. They have been able to identify things such as fantasy proneness. Fantasy proneness is a concept basically to denote high imagination. People that have a very good imagination to the point that they can close their eyes and see images and feel good about it. There are certain type of people that have that ability to a great extent. Most of us have it in the middle. We can see a few things, or we can engage in fantasy of different sorts, but within certain limits. And then there are people that, as much as they try, they don't have much of a fantasy life. It's like everything in life, intelligence, creativity. There are people that have a lot, that have a little, and most of us are kind of in the middle. That happens with things of fantasy. There are ways of measuring fantasy proneness. The same with dissociation. Dissociation is a concept that has become, again, very popular in psychology and psychiatry. Was very big in the 19th century. Dissociation is the process that the human mind has to separate perceptions or memories or sensations. So usually what happens is you are traumatized, you're in a car accident, you forget what happened to you. The mind kind of splits the memory because there's too much anxiety, too much stress. To protect yourself, you have amnesia, you forget. That's a separation of memory from consciousness. But there is also separation of sensation. People have sometimes a paralysis of a limb, or this hand, they don't feel sensation in a hand, and that can be related to a negative experience or something that happened to them. The number of dissociative experiences that people have can be measured by different scales that have been created. So this is another thing that we study in parapsychology to try to relate phenomena in general or the out-of-body experience to fantasy or to dissociation. The same to proneness to hypnosis or to all kinds of religious experiences and the like. What we find is just what we found with the parapsychological experiences, that the people that are very open with their imagination, that have more dissociative experiences, that are more open to being hypnotized, those people that show that mental openness to all those type of experiences also have more out-of-body experiences than the people that are low on hypnotic susceptibility or dissociation or the like. And what it's telling us is that there is a particular profile, that there is a particular type of person that is very open in terms of the mental inner life as compared to many other people that are the opposite, that are closed. When you measure these things in a scale, you can see that some people are very high on fantasy or dissociation. And then there are others that have almost nothing, that have no imagination at all or very little, and you can compare those against each other. And of course, most people are in the middle. We all have some of those abilities, some of that potential, and it's used in some moments, but not in others. Again, but what we have found is the out-of-body experience is related to those other capacities. And not only out-of-body experiences, but many other parapsychological experiences as well. And those are very important findings. We still don't understand the nature of these experiences, but knowing that there are these associations help us to connect the out-of-body experience with many other human experiences, or we could say with normal psychological functioning. Basically meaning that a lot of our psychological makeup, our mental life, is related to the production of these experiences in some way. We don't know exactly how. Some people will argue, and we'll get more on that at the end, that means that maybe some of these experiences are only imagination. Some people argue that. That's not necessarily the case. And I personally think it's too premature to really say that. Maybe for some people that could be the case. And remember, we may be dealing with different types of explanations. There are different types of phenomena. There are phenomena that look the same but have different explanations. That's a possibility with out-of-body. But at this point in the research enterprise, we only know that there are certain relationships. And that is that big openness comes together with psychic experiences and out-of-body experiences. And hopefully that will allow us in the future to develop, better theories, because as we understand better all these other ideas like dissociation, for example, or fantasy that come from psychology, as there is more progress in understanding those ideas, that will give us information to understand the out-of-body experience. For example, the dissociation, now there is a lot of research. The thing is that most of the research that psychiatrists and others do on dissociation is on the mental pathology side. So a very extreme form of dissociation is what they call now dissociative identity disorder, which is the new name for the multiple personality disorder. These experiences where people, after heavy trauma, split into different personalities, and they talk to you like a little child, like an older person. They can have 2, 3, or a lot more personalities. That's the most extreme form of dissociation in the pathological way. But there is also a lot of positive or more normal dissociation, what we call experiences where people get absorbed, where they're driving a car, or they are reading a book. They're reading a book and they get so much into the book that if someone comes and say, hey, it's time to eat, they were so much into the story. Or watching a movie. I remember that happened to me only once. I was watching this movie. I was with a friend and he had to be sitting on the back because we came late. There were no seats. I didn't notice at a moment where he came and sat by me. The movie was so engrossing, was so interesting that at one point he made a comment and touched me. And I thought, but you were back there. That's an example of high absorption at that particular moment. Other people do it with lecturers, if you find this lecture very interesting and you may be getting so much into it, I'll be very happy because I think I'm being really effective and good. That could be an example of absorption. You get into something completely. That's a form of dissociation. That's not pathological. That happens every day. For some people it happens a lot, for others it happens rarely. The experience that I told you in my case is a rare one. I'm not very high on absorption. Other people are very, very high, but it's a completely normal thing. So you find that out-of-body experiences relate to dissociation, but there are different types of dissociation. And that's where the research wants to go. Is the out-of-body related to the pathological dissociation, to the non-pathological, or what is the nature of that relationship? And we still are trying to tangle things out because some studies, including one that we performed, show that pathological type of dissociative experiences are related to out-of-body experiences. But the question is, does that mean that the OBE is pathological or not? I tend to think that we cannot do a one-to-one connection. Because sometimes when you do this type of correlational research, what you are measuring is a general disposition of the mind to be open. And when the mind is open, depending on what's happening in your life, it could go to pathology or it could go to potential. You have that's what happens in creativity. You're a highly creative person. If your environment or many other things in your life have a negative impact, that creativity can go into schizophrenia or into other maladjustment less severe than schizophrenia. But if you have a very supportive parents that are always supporting you, making you read good stories, good books, good people around, good education, that could go into high creativity, artistic abilities. And so we have a lot of things like that in life that can go for the bad or for the good, depending on all kinds of factors. And of course, there's also a genetic component that in the case of out-of-body experiences, we know nothing about. We only have indications here and there. So it's really an unknown, but that's exactly what this type of research is trying to do, is bring together all these questions and say, can we prove this or not? What can we do with it? And we are still starting. There is not a lot of research being done on this. You basically get just a couple of 3-4 papers every year on this type of stuff. So there is not a lot of people working on it compared to the hundreds or maybe even thousands of people that work every year on schizophrenia, on dreams, on many other things. That's one of the problems that this field has. That as interesting, fascinating it is, it doesn't have money for research. It doesn't have a lot of people working in the field. So when you have just 3, 4, 5 papers every year, knowledge just goes, a quarter of an inch like that. But you read the studies of dissociation every year. There are hundreds of studies. You open a journal, and this new article changed the whole field of when it was a year before. I had that experience recently. Some articles I was reading. It's amazing how fast some of these fields in psychiatry move. But they have a lot of people working on it, and a lot of money and resources. We don't have that with out-of-body. But we're trying to do the same that science does in general, make sense of this phenomena related to the natural world, to the other psychological experiences, to mental health, and see what's the place of this phenomena in our life. That's basically what we're trying to do. We sometimes are not so successful, but we try. And before the break, I just want to show you the last transparency. I'm just making signals that we need to take a break, which is another fascinating aspect of out-of-body experiences, which is the impact these things have on people. We're going to get a little more that on near-death experiences, because with near-death experiences, that's what people really change. But in out-of-body experiences in general, there have been a few studies, including ours, the one that says Alvarado and Zingrone in 1998. What I have chronicled here are just some types of changes. People change in terms of beliefs, believe in an afterlife, believe in God, things like that. In terms of values, do you value material possessions, or do you value friendship, or more abstract concepts like love? And what we find is that people tend to move less from the material. They move into what we would call good values. They're more loving, they have better relationship with others, they have beliefs that incorporate more good interpersonal relationship, anti-war. Basically, a lot of them become much better human beings. And for some of them it was a good change, because some of them were kind of obnoxious people to start with. And then they have this experience, and the family say, wow, but you were such an obnoxious guy, and now you're so loving. And they love it, they grab the guy. And there are also some problems of adjustment, but that will come later with the near-death studies. But anyhow, the percent here is of some type of change, either value or belief or something. And as you can see, there is a lot of changes in many of the studies. And this is of great importance for psychology, for psychotherapy, for counseling. If this experience is changing people, and we have some evidence, why? Why are they changing? Some people just say, well, because experience, a lot of people confront the experience and say, I know now that I have a spirit, because I was in the spirit. As simple as that. Most people say that. And that makes sense, that will lead you to change, but you have to do more research, because there could be many other aspects to the question. Do men change more than women? Do you change more if your experience is 5 seconds as opposed to an experience of 30 minutes or 1 hour? There are a lot of research questions that can be asked. Do you change more if you are near death or if you are not near death? At least one study from Italy showed that when they measure changes of near death versus non-near death out-of-body experiences, the near death ones are the ones that produce the big changes. So we have some information that interacts with experience. And that's, again, a topic for further research. But this is the area where near-death studies have gone more into. with this, I will conclude this part of the lecture. When we come back in the next part, we're going to talk a little more, or Nancy will, on laboratory studies of out-of-body experiences when we bring people to the lab and ask them to do things. Very interesting also. And she will then cover the area of near-death experiences, trying to basically present the same outline I have followed, research and cases, but from the near-death studies literature. So this is this part. If you have any questions about what we have discussed. Yes.
I've always understood that it is difficult for most people to remember their dreams in any comprehensive way. Do the OBE experiencers have any problems in remembering what they have been through?
Some of them do, but most of them, their claim is, and when you talk to them, it's kind of impressive that the experience is very vividly in their minds. And they will even make comparisons of their out-of-body experience with their dreams. Many of them will say this is much more vivid than a dream. And they will tell you, I am sure that this is not a dream because my dreams have a different quality. This experience was much more vivid. I had a sense of being there that I never have in a dream. That's fairly typical of Andere. That also is a difference that people have between usual dreams and lucid dreams. In lucid dreams, they will also say, I felt like I was there, it was very different. So there are certain states that give you that assurance. However, within that, I will assume that people sometimes may forget certain things. We are dealing here with collective information from human beings, and anything that depends from memory, to some extent, is unreliable. So I always assume that there is certain amount of forgetting or even of elaboration when you are telling a story years later. We did a study that we were trying to test using near-death experiences that were collected in Australia by a different researcher. She published all the data, and she had not analyzed it in terms of how old the experience was. There were experiences that were told to the researcher a week after the event. Others were 20 years ago. And then we were saying, oh, okay, maybe the older the experience, maybe they will be more exaggerated or more, and we were trying to test that. That maybe over time people distort that, because that happens sometimes when you tell stories. You tell stories about what you did in the war or something. Sometimes you start telling these stories in a modest way, and you went telling them that you won the war by yourself or something like that. That's exaggerated, but it's that type of distortion. And we tried to do that in entering all that data into the computer, and we found absolutely no evidence for that at all. And other studies also have failed to find that. So there are ways empirically to try to address issues like that of memory, to see if there is distortion, if the older experiences are different in some way, more exaggerated or less. And if you find that, then okay, that's evidence for that. But to my knowledge, no one has found that yet. And that's reassuring in the sense that maybe these experiences have such a unique quality. And that's what you get, especially when you talk to people. If you talk and you talk to them face to face, as I have on several occasions, it's much different than hearing a dream or hearing other, an account of something that happened in your life. There is a quality on it. I have seen people, with their hairs and their arms standing as they're telling me, because they get very emotional telling the thing. Their eyes, they either cry or they get tears. There are all these indicators, at least the recollection is really emotional, it's really impactful. So, yes.
Did you hear about the people under anesthesia that see whatever is happening in the operating room and hear everything, and sometimes they're blind. Actually, the person in reality is blind, but she sees that the surgeon has a red sock and a green sock or something. Mm-hmm. And they describe what happened and who said what. And did you hear about that?
Yeah. Those will be experiences of veridical perception, mainly during the near-death experiences. And it's similar to what I was saying about people going out of the body and getting information and coming back. In the near-death setting, most of the time, not always. Because there are some people that are near death on the street, they're hit by a car, and that's what they have the experience. But a lot of people have them in the hospital, and what they see is what the physicians and nurses are doing around them, the attempts to resuscitate them, or even things like jokes that they were doing among themselves, or all kinds of things like that. And you find many accounts of people describing the scene, like saying, well, the physician was wearing a strange watch, and they describe the watch. In some cases, it was a unique type of watch, or things that people were wearing, or things that people were saying. There are people that start making jokes while they're doing this, or because they're so used to the medical procedure that's the way they deal with the thing. And later on, the patient says, "Oh, I heard you saying that I had a big head." And the guy said, "Oh, you heard that? I'm sorry. I was just that case. I remember I got a letter once from a guy in Puerto Rico that was telling me of an experience he knew of someone, one girl, an attractive girl that was being in surgery, and I think it was her uncle that was doing a surgery. And at one point, the uncle made a comment about how beautiful were the breasts of his niece, and later on, she was having an experience at the time. I never talked to her. I was never able to get through to her. I got this experience from this other person, and he never wanted to give me more information. But from his account, she heard that, and was heard, her own uncle saying something like that to other people, and later I found that it was true. Other people that were there were able to corroborate that. So those are examples of perceptions in the same area. The critics will come and will argue with things like that as long as all those things were said or were done around you really close, there is always a possibility that the person was perceiving things in a normal way. And that becomes always controversial. Is it possible for you, even while unconscious under anesthesia, to perceive certain things or not? If it's possible, then those cases become weaker, because there will be another explanation. You don't need to postulate, I was out of the body and I was perceiving. You could just say, well, the person was there lying down, but they were still hearing, and they register all that information, and later on they have memory of it. Some people have done studies, and they have been able to show some rudimentary forms of perception under anesthesia. These are not near-death experiences. They just put you under the anesthesia, and then they do some sounds and some other things, and they claim that there is some evidence that human beings can perceive things and later remember them under that state. But if that is enough to explain complex, sentences or events that happen, that's a whole different thing. One thing is, just to remember a few numbers that people say or sounds, and the other thing is to say, hey, you said that about my breast, or like the case I just mentioned. So it always remains, kind of a controversy, and come always back to the point of how much can you explain by the functions of the human body or not. That's why when a lot of researchers like to emphasize on cases of getting information, but of things that were not close to your body. And Nancy's going to get later to some cases where people are supposedly dying in the hospital, and then they go out and they see something in another room, or in the roof of the hospital, or in some other place, and there, something like that, it will be to stretch it too much to say, no, you were hearing something that was happening in the roof, and that then becomes very, very difficult. But those are the issues, that are dealt with. And in this area of research, you are always dealing with skepticism and a lot of critical thought, and as soon as you come with a finding, there's always someone trying to explain it away or saying, no, that's not true, it has to be this, And sometimes that's frankly clearly destructive. Other times it can help the research, because sometimes it makes you develop better procedures. So it depends, you have to take them one by one. But certainly there is a lot of criticism that is very weak, and it's just people that don't want to accept certain things. A lot of these phenomena are very threatening to people. Their worldviews are changed. If they accept that these things can happen, something going out, or the mind being able to do these type of things, for some people that's just too much, and we react defensively to all kinds of things. But anyhow, we'll discuss more of that when we talk about near-death experiences in Nancy's part.
Hi there, I'm Lisette Coley. I'm president of Parapsychology Foundation, so welcome to our YouTube channel. We have lots to look at, so please check out our videos. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.